everyone, I'm Anne-Marie from brambleberry.com, and today I'm here to show you a melt and pour soap project. What's melt and pour, you ask? Well, melt and pour is a pre-made soap base that's ready to melt and scent and color, pour into molds, and then is ready to use right away. Unlike cold process soap, which requires lye and water and fats and oils to make into soap, this requires none of that. All you need is an outside heat source, so a microwave or a double boiler on the stove, some time, and well, you're ready to go. This particular project uses green sea clay, which is supposed to be detoxifying and cleansing for the skin, and also uses Brambleberry's color blocks, charcoal and green chrome oxide. The color blocks are pre-mixed into melt and pour soap to make it really easy for you to get beautiful, even color each and every time without having to pre-mix. Finally, this project uses Vitality fragrance, and Vitality fragrance oil is really interesting because it has a bunch of essential oils in there, including ylang ylang and rosemary, some eucalyptus and some mint. It really smells kind of like a traditional spa fragrance that you would expect to smell in like the sauna of a high-end spa. So to get started, I have my unwrapped soap here, and all you do is cut the soap into kind of, 1 by 1 inch blocks. The reason you do this is because it helps the soap melt down evenly and cleanly. One of the things with melt and pour soap is you don't want to boil it. If you boil the soap, essential moisture is lost, so the soap becomes brittle. Also, it starts to smell really bad when you boil it. And so one of the ways to help with that overheating is to have evenly cut smaller sizes of the melt and pour soap. So I'm just going to cut all of this into small sizes and then put it into my Brambleberry easy pour containers, which can definitely go in the microwave, which is really nice. And then we'll be ready for the next steps, which is to pre-mix our colorants and color our soap. So I have my 3 colors of soap here. We got the white, the clear, the white. The black color block is going to go into the clear soap because if I use it with the white soap, I end up with gray, and that's not what this design calls for. So I'm just gonna put a generous chunk of the charcoal color in. And remember, you can always put more in, but you can't take it out. So I'm just gonna toss that right on top there and that'll melt with it. Same with this green chrome oxide. I'm gonna put a generous chunk in, and it's actually a larger chunk than the black because we're coloring it with white. So in order to overcolor the white, you do need a little bit more pigment. Now I'm gonna put this all in the microwave. I'm actually gonna put them all in at the same time, which means the entire batch will melt more slowly, but then we'll have even temperatures for all of these, because once we start to pour, we do want these temperatures to be fairly consistent between all 3 of our batches. All right, these are mostly ready, so I'm just gonna take my spoon and kind of see what's going on here. There is a singular chunk in here. It's not much. And I'm just gonna stir that in. And I'm gonna check this side here. So here we have our black. That charcoal is perfect. Also another singular chunk, not too worried about it. This is actually going to melt really nicely with a little bit of stirring. And I also need to add my sea clay now. So I'm gonna add my sea clay to my green. The green has, let's see, is there a chunk in here still? There's a chunk, but it's so small I can't even pick it up. So I'm just gonna let the stirring and the ambient temperature of the soap around it melt that chunk, because we do have to have these cool down to about 125 to 130 in order to suspend layers and swirls. So now I have my sea clay, and this is in just a little bit of rubbing alcohol, 1 tablespoon of rubbing alcohol to 1 teaspoon of sea clay, and I'm just gonna add all of it into my green soap. I'm just gonna grab the very last of it from the bottom because it did sink to the bottom, and stir it in. And since it's in rubbing alcohol, it's not going to affect the hardness of the soap. You can notice though, it is giving this green a more earthy look, which I really like. I think it adds to the sophistication in the color palette. So now it's time to add my fragrance oil. And so this Vitality, again, smells pretty herbaceous and spa-like. It's really nice. I'm gonna eyeball it. With melt and pour soap, you don't need to use nearly as much of the fragrance as you do with cold process soap, because this soap is not a high pH. It's already at a really wonderfully skin-loving pH, and the heat is not going to affect it nearly like cold process soap. So cold process soap starts at about a pH of 14, which is crazy. crazy high, which is why it's so damaging to the fragrance oil. That's not at all the case with melt and pour soap. You're working essentially with what is a neutral base or a neutral palette here, and so you don't have to use nearly as much fragrance, and you get a great scent that's really strong. You do want to make sure you're fully mixed in though, and since we're working with opaque colors here, you just give it a nice stir for an extra 15 seconds. It's good to stir it when you're taking the temperature because sometimes the very top gets a little colder than the middle, which makes sense. And so we're at like 140 to 150 between all of these. So I'm just going to wait a couple minutes and keep stirring continuously so the film doesn't develop and the soap continues to get cooler at an even temperature. So why do we care about the temperature? With this particular example, I wanted to show you what happens if you pour it too warm. So this is actually all three. This is the white, the green, and the black, and it just got poured way too warm. And so the colors just all muddled together. The hotter this melt and pour soap is, the more liquid it is. As the soap cools down, the more viscous and thick it gets. And so that keeps our layers more separate and more solid and really shows the distinction between the colorants. So just gonna do a really quick final temperature check, but we're at like 124, 125, 124. We're a little bit hotter on the black, which makes a lot of sense, right? There's no titanium dioxide in there. So it's just a little bit warmer, but we can make that work. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the green. That's the coolest of the temperatures. Just gonna pour into the mold, just kind of a side, just a little bit, just enough to give a little bit of coverage. Toss a little bit of black in, just go straight down. And then from here, it's just a matter of waiting, layering, swirling, making interesting little loop-de-loops, just enough to kind of get some interesting stuff in there, but nothing that's gonna muddy this or make it so that it's not just a kind of gorgeous, clearly obvious layer. And it's a lot harder to do that at the very beginning. Everything is so much kind of thinner and it's not very viscous yet, and so our layers aren't really holding and our design isn't holding. You'll see as we get into this that all of a sudden we go from, oh, this is maybe a little bit too liquid to, oh, we have to hurry up. One way to make sure that you don't get clumps in your soap though is just to kind of keep stirring continuously during this time period. You can see there's a little bit of skin that just formed on the top of my soap here in the mold. I just broke through it because of how high I'm pouring. With this particular spigot, or spout, it's so long that you can get a little bit lower. You can flood a little bit if you want and not have to pour from so high. So here the black, you can see it's going straight in, but some of it's staying on the top. So just be thinking, when I cut this from the side, what's this gonna look like? And you can just pour really delicately and really gently. I know that's gonna be a strikingly dramatic look. And my white soap I see is forming just a little bit of a skin, so I'm just gonna stir that in and get that nice and even again and ready to pour. So I'm gonna start at this end and just pour gently, getting some beautiful contrast colors, pouring slowly. And I can see right here, do you see those, do you see the bubbles? Take some little bit of rubbing alcohol, spray it right into those bubbles, get rid of the bubbles. So that way when you cut your soap, you don't have bubbles in there. I'm gonna do green now. Boy, this green really has a nice thick layer. That is definitely starting to coagulate on us. So just give it a quick stir. And now is when we start looking at these temperatures, feeling for the temperatures and going, okay, we're getting just a little bit thicker. I just saw some chunks go in. Those will be beautiful when they get cut. If you end up with some chunks that go in, say you had a little bit of skin at the top and it just went in, you know what? That's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna give it almost a chunky crystalline texture inside. There's so many different things you could do here. At this point, you could also be tossing embeds in if you wanted to. There's mica lines that you can do. There's so many fun concepts to do once you understand how to work with temperature and melt and pour soap. There's definitely a patience part to it, but there's also an art to it. So I can see I'm pouring a little bit fast, and so everything is just kind of blending together. Need to be a little more calm here. some bubbles here. Just gonna spray those away. Gonna give all this a quick stir again. My black is staying really, really, really liquid, but my green and my white are getting definitely thicker. And with melt and pour soap, if your white gets too thick or your green gets too thick, it's okay. You can toss it back in the microwave for like 5 or 10 seconds, just enough time to get a little bit less viscosity in there. So I'm gonna pour the black now. Just going to try and flood it a little bit on the surface here so I get more of a black layer, because that's gonna be a clear layer and it's gonna be really striking in the soap. There we go. And so now I have a couple options. I can let this harden just a little and form a skin, or I can just keep pouring. And this white layer is really thick. It's got some chunks in it, so it's definitely ready to pour. And remember, ooh, here we go, big chunk going in. Whee! That's actually gonna be really pretty as we cut. And so same with our green. We got our green going in. And remember, I just had that big chunk go in, so I know where I put all of that green. It's gonna be around the chunks. It's gonna be a beautiful design. Then you can see that soap is suspending really nicely. And so here's our green, which is getting a little bit thicker. Just gonna suspend that over there. You can see the layers are holding now. And now we have our black. And in order to get the swirl, I'm going to keep going back and forth over the mold, kind of an interesting little waves and patterns so that stays swirling. And we're getting close to the end. So now be thinking, okay, how do I want my end to be? Which color do I really want to showcase on the top? And how do I make sure that that top looks as interesting as the inside cuts are going to be? So that's when you start thinking, okay, where am I pouring and what is leaving white or black space here? So that's why I just did those vertical lines. Now I'm just going to do some horizontal lines back and forth, and then we do some black over the top, and then we're basically done, and it's time to cut. I'm gonna do one more accent color here with the black, and then a little bit more with the green, but the green is really showing up nicely already. And then we are gonna be done and done. And there's a lot of soap left over, and you can toss that wherever you want or however you want to. Ooh, that's so pretty. Here we go, a little bit of rubbing alcohol to finish that off. Then we just let this sit for 3 to 5 hours in the mold, and then we'll be ready to cut. Sometimes it's really tempting with melt and pour soap to put this in the fridge or the freezer to try and harden it up quicker. When you have layers, you don't want to do that. The refrigerator or the freezer is going to cause those layers to peel apart. So let this one just air dry and harden naturally. So this was made just a couple of days ago, and it is ready to easily pop out. So to pop melt and pour soap out, you just pull away from the sides, and then you press down gently on the back. And when you're doing that, what you're looking for is the airlock to break. And with the Brambleberry silicone molds, you can clearly see when that airlock is breaking, and it's pretty easy to just pop that soap right out. Once it's out, we have the choice of a crinkle cutter or a regular knife. They produce different results, and I'm going to show you both. For the first cut, I am going to use just a plain knife. So this is a plain non-serrated knife. You want to go straight down and really be thinking you want to press cleanly and smoothly. If you at all hesitate, your soap sometimes can fall apart because of the different sort of layering techniques. So once you have your cut, you want to make sure you push down cleanly and firmly. The next cut I'm going to show you is our crinkle cutter. So I'm going to just kind of shave off just a little bit on this end because I want it to be crinkle cut on both sides. And then here we go, cleanly and firmly down. And which cut do I like best? They're both beautiful. I have to say right now, I think I'm liking the crinkle cut a little bit better. This is so fresh, so spa-like, herbaceous. I love it. And the sea clay coloring with the green oxide is just perfect for this scent. So since I like the crinkle cut better, I'm just gonna keep doing this with the crinkle cutter, and then every bar is different. So like I can see here that my black and my it almost looks like it's clear, looks a little more muddy, and that's because that was poured just a little bit warmer. And then up here, you can see that the white is really sticking out, and that's because it was poured just a little bit cooler. Melt and pour soap hardens and thickens as it cools. So that's one of the reasons temperature is so important to watch for when you're doing a project like this. But remember, these designs are beautiful no matter how they look. And ultimately it's soap. No one knows what you were planning on doing or not doing. They're just gonna be amazed at how beautiful this 3-color swirl in Melt and Pour soap is. I'm gonna finish this with the knife cut just because you can kind of see the layers just a little bit differently or better. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna shave away that first little bit so that way the striations from the crinkle cutter are gone. And now we have a nice smooth face to work with again. And remember with the knife cut, you place and then you go firmly and fairly rapidly because you don't want to give any time for this to break. So for example, this white layer you can clearly see was poured just a little bit thicker, and that is the weaker point in here where the soap, if it's gonna break, will break. So like for example, here, this soap right here, you can see it's a line and a line. That's because it was poured more in a more cool fashion. Like so either the soap on the bottom or the top was a little bit harder, or this was just a little more cooler when it was poured. Up here, do you see how kind of swirly and a little bit muted those colors are? They were poured a little warmer, and so they sort of blended together. There are some kind of perfect bars that look just ideal to me, and like this one, for example, feels a little more striated everywhere, and it feels like this was really ideal temperature. The soap varies so much based on where and how you poured it. So for example, if this soap is harder, then it's automatically going to cool this soap off more quickly. The ambient air temperature has something to do with it. How much stirring you've done has something to do with it. And of course, the type of soap that you use really makes a difference. This swirl only works with this particular brand of soap. So for example, if you're going to try a different brand of soap, the temperatures will be different and you won't get quite this look and feel. So this is a clear example of the layering. I'm not sure if you can see it, but you can clearly see there's distinct layers right here. And of course, the mold was cold. So the second the soap got to the mold, that's why it's striated right there. So you can see how many layers we did just to get this beautiful swirl in there. There's at least 8 different layers that I can count here, if not more. So the glorious thing about Melt and Pour soap is these are ready to use right now. You can use them, you can give them away, you can sell them. All you need to do is package them up. One of the things with Melt and Pour soap is it has extra liquid glycerin added to the soap during the soap making process. And what's liquid glycerin? Liquid glycerin is a humectant that draws moisture to the skin, or in this case, the bar of soap. So you really want to make sure that you've packaged your soap in a semi-airtight container. And I like to use saran wrap, honestly, but you can use shrink wraps. You can do a whole host of bag options, but you want to make sure that you're protecting your soap from the air, because the air has excess moisture in it. So it will actually go whoop, and cause little glycerin dew dots on your Melt and Pour soap. If you're like, but I don't want to package mine, what do I do? If you run this soap under a fan for the next 24 to 48 hours, it will make it have a kind of a thick skin almost that will not attract the glycerin dew. So you have options, but I generally like to pack up my Melt and Pour soap to protect it from the air. It keeps it fresher for longer, and it really helps the moisturizing ability for that liquid glycerin do its work on your skin. Thanks for watching this episode. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up below. And of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe so every single time that a new video comes out, you're notified and can watch it right away. Until next time, happy soaping.
No,
10 minutes of cutting is scintillating.
Yeah.
It's very ASMR. It's like a spa. All right. Okay, this project. It uses a very dirty. No. Whee. I guess we don't need to be ready for the next steps because the colorants are color blocks, and technically the sea clay is an additive and not a colorant. Gray. No one wants gray. That's so bad. I cannot say that. People like gray. Here we go. It's gonna be a while. Plus, but then I can actually show you videos of the helicopter rescue, which is more interesting. I'm just playing my drums here, my tambourines. This is my musical instruments. Whee! It smells so good. I mean, fine with it.